The dazzling ceiling shot. The mind-blowing flip reset. The silky smooth 180-degree backflip flick. All of these mechanics take amazing skill and concentration to pull off. They truly showcase just how consistent, proficient, and straight-up skilled you can be at Rocket League. But let's be honest, most of us can't pull off these moves. But you know, there are a lot of crazy Rocket League mechanics out there. Well, we know from Flume that there's at least 10 anyway. A lot of them are really hard to pull off though. In fact, I'm willing to bet 90% of you couldn't even pull off 5 of these 10 moves consistently. Not that you would want or need to, but that's beside the point. Instead, I think there's a whole nother set of moves that we're all a little more familiar with. That's why today I'm going to be revealing my top 10 worst mechanics in Rocket League. Now these mechanics will be much more familiar to the average Rocket League player. Whether you're wanting to get better at Rocket League or just keep sucking and having fun, I can guarantee that each one of these moves are a staple in your gameplay. But don't worry, I'm also going to cover how to stop doing each of these moves as well. Though I do warn you, even pros will pull out some of these bad boys every once in a while. So you might as well join me through the ride and get comfortable with the 10 worst mechanics that we know all too well in Rocket League. First up is the quarter flip. The name doesn't really make sense for what I'm describing, but I'm calling it that because it's basically not quite a half flip. It's getting there, but it's definitely not there. I essentially just use this to describe any half flip in which your flip gets either canceled too early, too late, or just gets mangled in whatever way you manage to mess it up. You know what I mean. A half flip should look like this, or like this, but sometimes they just come out wrong, like a poorly baked cake or something. Sometimes you feel like you have all the ingredients, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, man. The best way to avoid the quarter flip is to practice proper half flip technique like a million times. Do it until you think you couldn't possibly mess it up, and then do it 20 million more times. And then maybe you'll manage to never whip out this god-awful monstrosity ever again. Maybe. Second is the premature ceiling shot. This one's great, again, because it's very close to the actual real move. The normal ceiling shot is really effective, if you have the skill to pull it off, of course, because you can delay your dodge unnaturally long due to falling off the ceiling instead of jumping off. This means you can catch the defender off guard by flipping when they least expect it. The premature ceiling shot, however, takes on the appearance of skill, like a typical ceiling shot, but it completely removes the usefulness because the premature ceiling shooter will use their dodge right away, basically within the same time frame as if they jumped off the ceiling. Now there are times where you can jump off the ceiling and get good power and placement when it's needed, but the reason this particular mechanic is one of the worst is when it's taken from a ways out from goal and the defender is already back. It's incredibly easy to defend, and it's basically completely useless. I don't really have a way to avoid the premature ceiling shot since it's simply the actual ceiling shot in an earlier form. You won't get better unless you try things, so I don't want to discourage you from trying these. I just like making fun of people who go for them, because it's funny. Number 3 is something I'm sure we've all seen, and the most interesting thing about this one is it's actually most commonly done with a keyboard. No, I'm not ragging on keyboard and mouse players, I'm just talking about the guys who complain mid-game about how bad their teammate is, how rotten their luck is, how hard their life is. If you're struggling with the crybaby mechanic, you probably just need to take a step back, realize it's just a game, and it's supposed to be fun, and maybe reevaluate your life decisions. In other words, just stop typing mid-game and go into free play if you're too triggered to be playing, because no one wants to hear the novel you're typing out, especially your teammates that are just trying to chill and play some Rocket League. Number 4 is the unnecessary demo. Now you may notice a trend here of these mechanics being like almost useful, and that's because the real demo is useful. Same goes for bumps. And the best thing about these types of plays is they're useful in basically every single rank. However, the unnecessary demo is simply when a player goes a little bit too far out of the way to make this move. Usually it's done out of anger or frustration, sometimes because the player themselves got demoed and they'd like to get revenge for some reason, because they're mad about it for some reason, even though it's a clear game mechanic that was intended to be used, and it somehow violates some kind of weird code of ethics that involves them not being beaten by the opponent. It's complicated. The point is, the unnecessary demo can cause some real havoc if it pulls you out of position and takes you away from the play. Obviously, to avoid doing this, it's just a matter of priorities. Make sure you're focusing on like being in position, or I don't know, the ball, or your teammate, and then if you got those things under control, then maybe go for a demo. Otherwise, maybe don't. Number 5 is more of a mental mechanic. I'm calling it the corner push because it's all about diving in when your teammate's already there on the corner on the ball. Obviously, this is especially problematic in doubles because by executing the corner push and diving in and challenging the ball when your teammate's already there, you're really committing 100% of your team to the opposite corner. This mechanic is obviously completely useless because even if you do make good contact and win the ball, your best case scenario is a center to nobody because, again, your teammate is already there. To avoid this mechanic, it's all about just being patient, letting your teammate do his thing. Even if he's going to lose the ball, it's still better to be back in this very specific scenario. Number 6 is the pinch gone wrong. I think we've all been in this position where we see the ball sliding up along the wall and we think, oh, this is the perfect time to slam my nose into the side of the ball and pinch it perfectly so it flies away with insane power, either into the opponent's net or at least on their side of the field. Well, sometimes, again, things just don't quite work out, and for whatever reason, we end up on the wrong side of the ball. You know, it sounds silly when we talk about it, but it happens more often than you'd think. In fact, I've done this a couple times just this week. You're going for a pinch and it just goes the wrong direction, either being centered to the other team or straight back into your goal. That happens too. And like most bad mechanics on this list, the best way to stop doing this is just to get better at actually pinching. And the best way to do that is making pinches a regular element in your free play warm-up and practice. One of the best ways to get faster and better at reads is free play, and doing a lot of pinches will generate a lot of power, which will help you learn those reads on the wall. So yeah, I guess I'm just saying just practice it. I don't know what else you want from me. Number 7, the first goal forfeit. You know, I'm realizing this list is getting more and more ridiculous as I go on. Just don't do it. The first goal forfeit. I mean, you get scored on and you forfeit. I don't understand it. It happens to me all the time. I think usually what this is a player's pretty much at the end of their rope. They've had a really rough streak of games. And the problem really here is you need to stop when you're getting frustrated. Instead, players that are victims of this bad mechanic just keep queuing even when they're ridiculously angry. The game starts, something goes wrong, usually wouldn't be that much of a problem to overcome. I mean, we're talking 1-0, first goal, and they throw up the forfeit. This obviously sends a terrible message to the teammate, and I honestly can't think of many times when my teammate requested to forfeit on the first goal and then we ended up doing anything positive in that game. I mean, you just know your teammate's a train wreck when that happens. I mean, there really is no hope. Number 8 is affectionately named the Pap from Johnny Boy. I'll just let him describe it.
Might be able to get a goal here. If he can absolutely boom this ball, never mind. He's just papped it. That's what you call a pap right there. Not a pop, not to be confused for something useful. Just a pap. Something very, very easy to save.
I think a lot of times it happens when you're indecisive. You're not sure if you want to power the ball. You're not sure if you just want to pop it up and try to control it, go for an air dribble. You're not sure, so you just pap it. For this one, it's all about being more decisive and sticking to your decisions. One of my biggest problems is overthinking everything when I'm playing. And if you're at all like that, you've probably seen the pap many times. To avoid this, I think it's important to approach the game with a more confident mindset, and just remember that in Rocket League, you might look like a fool if you go all in and make a mistake, but that's always better than just doing things halfway, because at least you'll learn from your mistakes if you try your hardest. And number 9 on my list is the air flick. If you're much of a dribbler or play ones at all, I'm sure you're very familiar with this little mechanic. This is simply the result of not controlling the ball on your first jump, and then also not recognizing that you don't have control and still going for your flick even though the ball is just a little bit too high, just a little bit out of reach. Anyway, it looks hilarious, but it can be salvaged. Here we see Nido Queen starting with an air flick, but then notice her nose comes back around and makes contact with the ball. So this bad mechanic can actually backfire and end up being a good mechanic, and if you play it off, your opponents won't really know the difference. But anyway, like I said earlier, the way to avoid this is to work on your control on that first jump, keeping the ball close when you're going for a flick. That's really all you need to do if you're air flicking too much. And now the last on our list, the ultimate bad mechanic, some would say the worst and most prominent bad mechanic, is the classic backflip. The unintentional backflip has even affectionately been dubbed the feels backflip for the emotions it causes when you're planning on going for a quick double jump aerial and you pull back on that stick just a little too long while you're still tapping a jump. Now, when I first started doing fast aerials, obviously this was a major problem, and I'm sure many of you have figured out that the best way to avoid this is just a clear separation in the steps in a fast aerial. In other words, boost, jump, pull back on your stick, jump again, all while holding boost. You know what I mean. As long as you're not holding your stick while you're pressing dodge, you should be fine. But recently, Verge actually taught me a quicker and more advanced way to also avoid this, and that is to hold down your stick right before and as you're jumping the first time, then letting go, then jumping. It's a small difference, but it really helps with your fast aerials. But just remember, even if you're still having trouble with this move, it still shows up in pro gameplay, which is why it's most prominent and last on this list. And there you have it, the 10 worst mechanics in Rocket League. Hopefully this video didn't hit too close to home. Just remember, if you want to avoid these mechanics, basically the main thing is just to be better and practice more. It's not that hard, just go into free play, guys. Because this is where bad habits end and good habits begin.